Good afternoon. Okay, thank you. So my name is Mariam Swale. I head the Ocean Climate Innovation Hub in Kenya, and I also work at the Technical University of Mombasa. So today's topic is on Africa's roadmap for marine carbon dioxide removal. There is a whole story behind this roadmap, but essentially, first of all, why do we need the roadmap, or why the roadmap? And also, what we are going to discuss today is look at what this roadmap is and also how you can get involved. And apart from that, we are also going to look at how different stakeholders can be involved in this roadmap. So basically, the roadmap is a framework, is a document that is designed to help us. It's like a road. Over a period of years, what as Africans can we achieve as far as MCDR is concerned? So, first of all, why do we need this roadmap and why is it important? So, we already know, people have already spoken here, Africa has a huge potential, very large coastline, and also apart from that, the blue economy is $1 trillion economy that is being underutilized. And another thing that is also a concern is that climate change is affecting our oceans. And how can we resolve this? So one solution is marine carbon dioxide removal. I understand there are a lot of mitigation strategies which have been discussed here, like renewable energies or decarbonizing the shipping industry. But what we are going to look at today is something very new to most African countries. And as African countries, how can we be able to contribute to this new sector? And also, how can it contribute to the blue economy? So this roadmap, I have to hold it. Okay. So basically, this year in February, we were in Dar es Salaam. These are people from different organizations, different countries across Africa, from researchers to policymakers, innovators, as well as professors from universities. We had organizations like AU, which was involved, and also organizations which are not from Africa, because we needed to also learn from them. So this map shows you the different countries that were involved in that workshop. This was the initial stage, but this roadmap is meant to involve as many African countries as possible, as well as many organizations as possible. So according to the map, we had around 15 African countries, but we are hoping to expand our reach. So our discussions during the workshop were centered around 5 things. Assessment, to look at if we were to do marine carbon dioxide removal, what impact will it have to the environment? And how can we mitigate that? Number 2, as African institutes or countries, what technical or infrastructural support do we have for us to be able to implement marine carbon dioxide removal? If you're here in the morning or in the afternoon, there was a session on marine carbon dioxide removal showing you the different techniques on how marine carbon dioxide removal or different techniques of doing marine carbon dioxide removal, from blue carbons to ocean alkalinity enhancement to very technical things like electrochemistry. So as Africans, do we have that technical and infrastructural support for us to be able to implement that? Then the other thing, we're looking at finance. How can we create funding for this? Because many times as Africans we complain we don't have money. How can we implement these expensive things? But it is possible, right? So that's another thing that we looked at, either through partnerships or through philanthropists. Then the other thing we're looking at is policy and governance. Somebody here said that we make a lot of policies, which is true. Policies are important. We cannot have enough policies. We need as many policies as possible because for you to implement anything, it must be backed by policy, right? You agree with me? So how can we integrate this into our different policy frameworks so that to create that enabling environment, and so that whatever we are doing is ethical and inclusive? The last thing is science to entrepreneurship. How can we create entrepreneurship from this marine carbon dioxide removal? And this is through innovations. You know, Africa has the youngest population. We have so many young people either graduating or they're jobless, but we are hoping that through this roadmap, we can look at how can this new blue economy venture create opportunities for people in entrepreneurship. So we see that the roadmap has several values, but we looked at these 5. Strengthening resilience, because it's not about removing carbon, but how can this roadmap, when we implement marine carbon dioxide removal, how can it support communities who are on the front line? How can it support our oceans so that it becomes more productive? The other thing that we're looking at is African leading their own innovation, their own research, their own work. And lastly, create partnerships between different countries and different organizations. So to discuss this, I have a very wonderful panel. I know they are all men. I am diluting the panel. It's so we have a very wonderful panel, and I would like to invite them so that we can have this discussion. So the first person on my list is a very important person when it comes to, So the first person, I would like to invite Dr. Addis, who is the Director of Ocean Resilience and Climate Alliance. He's very important because he's led a lot of marine conservation work in many countries, including African countries. And also, he knows how to bridge the science and policy, and also how to get us funding, which is very important. Then the other person I would like to invite, Ernest Ofori. Ernest is the co-executive director of Monaham. Oh, why are you not clapping for my panel? is Ernest Ofori. He's the co-executive director of Emerging Climate Frontiers. And another thing about Ernest, he's working a lot with youths and the Green Africa Youth. And their work majorly is to capacity build on emerging technologies. He's doing an amazing work. Then the next panelist I would like to invite is Gabriel Muswali. Mr. Dr. Gabriel Muswali. I think he brings a very interesting perspective in this in this panel. He's a strategy and program advisor to both Eastern Africa Platform for Non-State Actors in Fisheries and Aquaculture and the Pan-African Platform for Non-State Actors in Fisheries and Aquaculture. He'll tell us a lot about how to engage communities and livelihoods. Then the last person, and also very important, Mr. Edwin Mwashinga. He's a program specialist at IOC UNESCO. His work focuses on advancing ocean science and governance in Africa. We're expecting another panelist, but he's on his way. I hope he just landed. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, dear panelists. So to start off our discussion, I think I'll start with Edwin. Edwin's work at IOC UNESCO is very important, and IOC UNESCO's work is majorly on ocean, and they are creating very important documents and also engaging different stakeholders in ocean issues in Africa. So I would like to know from you, Edwin, how can the IOC UNESCO support this African roadmap? Is it something that is a priority for you, or does it align with your work?
Thank you so much, Miriam. I hope you can hear me well. Yep. I don't want to shout because maybe I can shout, but there are these devices. For those of you, you can just use these devices. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. First of all, just to expand on IOC, because most of you know the International Olympic Commission or Committee. IOC UNESCO is not the International Olympic Committee. It's the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. We are a sub-commission within UNESCO who promotes ocean science, capacity building, ocean observation amongst our member states. We have 152 member states. In Africa, we have 38 member states. And I'm being in a very special country because it's a landlocked country, but it is a member of IOC. Ethiopia is a landlocked country, but it's a member of the IOC. So it recognizes the importance of oceans even to landlocked or internal countries. So I had to put that forward so that at least you know what I'm talking about. So the IOC promotes ocean science, and it's facilitating or coordinating the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. For those of you who don't know it, please Google. It is available. We have implemented the decade. It started in 2021. And it ends in 2030, so we are midway into the decade. And why MCDR is important for Africa? Through the IOC, we developed the Ocean Decade Africa Roadmap. So this is translating the global Ocean Decade framework into a framework that is contextualized to Africa. So we did a very robust study within our member states, a very participatory study, and we developed an Ocean Decade Africa roadmap. This is our framework document for the Ocean Decade in Africa. And that roadmap highlights 9 key priorities that Africa should focus on to deliver the science we need for the ocean we want by 2030. And within that roadmap, one of the priorities is actually strengthening blue carbon potential in Africa. What is blue carbon? The mangroves, the seagrasses, the salt marshes, the kelp forest, all that. So the ocean sequesters a lot of carbon in that perspective. And we don't want to limit ourselves only to what we know. There's a lot that we don't know, and that's the beauty of innovation and technology, right? We have to agree that if we don't know something, then we should be able to learn about it. So we are opening ourselves up to learn about marine carbon dioxide removal, to understand the impacts that it has to our coastal ecosystems and the benefits. So we weigh and weigh the negative impacts and the positive impacts, and if overall it is positive to us, then we should not close our minds to it. So as IOC Africa, we want to promote that science, we want to promote that capacity, we want to promote our scientists within Africa to study more on this topic and to give us evidence, because it has to be evidence backed, and that is what we want. When we approach these new technologies, then we have research about it, and we have information that can guide our member states on how to uptake it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edwin. I loved what you talked about learning and not shying away from these new technologies or innovation. Based on that, I would like to bring this question to Ernest, because I know you're currently working on SRM and CDR, which I know it has developed a lot of controversies. So tell us, what are the biggest misconceptions, and how as Africans can we overcome that?
Thank you very much, Marian, for the question. I believe, and I agree with Edwin, that as Africans and as a continent, we need to strengthen our capacity, our scientific capacity to match up, because the essence of all these technologies to help us adapt to build climate resilience. If you are sequestering more carbon, it means we are adapting to climate change more. It means the impact is reducing, and it means we are helping fisher communities, fisher folks, helping blue economy thrive. But the problem, or the biggest challenge, or some of the risks that I have identified, I call it carbon colonialism. You know, that is something that we should also be very careful with, because we've seen in more times where the global north, who has the technology, who has the funding, sort of develop some of these or propose some of these technologies because of their gains they are going to get. At the end of the day, if this is going to be commercialized, if MCDR techniques are going to generate carbon credit, which is a better way of, polluters must pay principle, where people who are suffering from the brunt would get, some way be compensated for what they go through, then I think we should thrive carefully, because how well do we know the technologies that are being proposed to us? What is the level of research that we know in this? Are they going to seize portion or several kilometers? Because if you look at some of the technologies, the research that have gone on, like the ocean alkalinity enhancement research that has gone on since the 90s, several kilometers are being covered, and the research is, conducted. And in that case, it means those areas are restricted. If those areas are areas where fisher folks within the community thrive and get their fish and, thrive within the economy, then it means we are preventing them from accessing those areas. That means you are not making sure that these people are getting the benefit that they need, right? It is skewed towards the people who just want to, develop technologies and get credit. I think that is one bigger challenge that we need to look at. Also, I think one of the things that exacerbates these things are the lack of course, government or policies or regulatory frameworks. I think in the previous session, the speaker said there are a lot of policies and frameworks in Africa, but in emerging areas like this, there's not much that has been done. Even research is dominant in just two main technologies: ocean fertilization and ocean alkalinity enhancement. So it means this has not come to a point where the parties would agree, because there's not a lot of research in this area. So most of those areas are the risk and the benefit are not necessarily a lot, or they are not substantiated enough with enough data to say that, okay, this is going to help us as an African continent, or this is going to help us as a country, so we should rally behind that. I think because of that lack of the regulatory framework, people can just sit behind research and still deploy. Because I could say I'm doing a research, what would be the extent of the research that I could do? Am I able to tell the impact? Because the ocean is also like the atmosphere. When I inject something in the ocean, ions in the ocean or whatever in the ocean, it will not stay within the parameters that I injected them. It will travel beyond that, and that will also be problematic. For misconceptions, I think this is one thing that would always strive because of lack of capacity to some extent, because most of the folks who do not want to hear about climate technology or interventions or whatsoever will come with framings that will make it seem that this is going to wipe off our ocean, it's going to kill everything in our ocean. And, these are things that would come. But I think that's one of the misconceptions, that MCDR is just going to kill everything in the ocean. We should leave the ocean to do whatever the ocean does. But I think there's a big question mark there. If whatever that is happening, majority of them is just a natural replication or a replication of the natural processes that happens. If we are adding ions into the ocean to enhance the phytoplanktons growth, to help sequester more carbon, I don't think it is anything out of way, right? What I think should be done is that a lot of research obviously should be done in this area. Also, people think that that is it. MCDR is the solution to the climate crisis, and that obviously is a misconception, because even if you look at removals alone cannot do anything. We are looking at reduction and removals. So the twin target is the thing that everybody is looking at. Reduction as much as possible, and then removal as much as possible. So these become complementary strategies that we do as we focus on business as usual. Business as usual is adaptation and mitigations. Try to put out your mitigation strategies to help us reduce emissions and whatnot. So these are some of the few things that is really going on that people are saying that I think we need to write them.
Thank you very much, Ernest. And I agree with you. A lot of research and also creating awareness is very important when it comes to MCDR work. But also, you talked about fisher communities in your... Oh. You also spoke about fisher communities, and I know that is at the heart of the work Gabriel does. And it will also be good to hear your perspective, Gabriel, on do you think this MCDR is going to support livelihoods? And if so, how do you think it can best contribute to these issues, especially when it comes to food security, job creation, or resilience?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. And before I respond to that, as a scientist, I would want to just comment on MCDR as a science. Aspersions about science have always been there, and they'll always be there. Those in the science space will never stop carrying out science because of aspersions against science. And if the aspersions against science were to be upheld, those of us who come from other countries would not have come here, because we are not the ones who actually invented aeroplanes. Science is always shrouded in mystery, and that will never end, my brother. That will never end. We shall always walk on with that. the saying in science is that science cannot eliminate inherent risks in it. So MCDR as a science is not going to be stopped simply because the risks that are there, the misconceptions that are there. Now, having said that, let me come to my question. Yes, I work for an organization called East African Platform for Non-State Actors in Fisheries and Aquaculture. Right? Is it off? Sorry. And I also support initiatives for Pan-African Platform for Non-State Actors in Fisheries and Aquaculture. And we work with small-scale fishers. We also work with small-scale aquaculturists towards realizing two very important SDGs, the SDG 1 and SDG 2, which are very critical for Africa. Poverty in Africa and hunger in Africa. So anything that touches on those particular SDGs is at the core of what we do. As we all know, the small-scale fisheries in Africa are the major driver, or is the major contributing factor to the fish that we consume and the fish that we trade in Africa. So a technology such as MCDR, which has direct bearing on our livelihood, is of compound interest to us, as it were. So we really believe that that is a technology that should be appraised and supported. And as we do that understanding that starting to look at the negatives of our technology would not be the way to go. And talking about a policy framework, I think just like my friend indicated, policies are not things that you say that you have had enough of them. For as long as you live, for as long as you are in development work, you'll need the policies. Because these are the frameworks that govern the execution of the development agenda that you would want to address. There has been, this thinking that Africa has had enough policies and now we should go to implementation. I don't think so. We should have as many policies as we get involved in development work, but we should also implement the policies that we have in place. But the question is, why is Africa not implementing development policies? There must be a reason. I think Africa has not developed a policy culture. A policy culture in Africa is weak. Okay? In my work, I interrogate a number of development policies in Africa. And one thing that you'll realize, which is very common, is that as Africans, we shall rush to formulate a policy, then have it on the shelf. The question of resourcing policy implementation is very, very critical. This morning, I had an opportunity to interact with some lady from this particular country, and I wanted to understand what is behind this phenomenal development that I'm seeing in Ethiopia. And she's told me so many things, including, she said, patriotism. So the question is, if the policy is the vehicle for bringing about the transformation we want to do, and it's a reflection of the extent to which we can demonstrate our patriotism as Africans, are we Africans patriotic if we can formulate policies and fail to implement them? So as Earfish, we are very committed to supporting an initiative that has direct bearing on issues of climate change, because that has huge influence on what we do. And let me assure you, Daktari, we would be willing to work together to explore the extent to which this particular initiative can contribute to this particular agenda. Of course, acknowledging the fact that there will be some risks, but risks are supposed to be part of what we do. Thank you.
You're not clapping for them. Yeah. So thank you very much, Gabriel. You said some very important things that I feel like our next speaker will really. I saw him writing so many notes. I'm sure he picked a lot. The question I'd like to ask Al is, we've talked about uncertainties and misconceptions in government. So, and we also need funding to do this, as Gabriel said. Like, we can't do policies without implementing them. So, how can we achieve that? So that, and whatever investment that is brought to Africa, and whatever research that is done in Africa is done in a responsible way, and it's inclusive and effective. And the other thing I'd like you to also touch on is, based on what we've discussed, is it possible for Africa to lead in this?
Thanks, Miriam. I love this sharing of the microphone. And yeah, I have the great privilege of being able to reflect on the amazing insights from the panelists. So thank you for bringing us all together. Really, the question is how are we going to pay for all of this work to grapple with these massive technical, ethical, social challenges that the panelists have raised. I'm new to the field of MCDR. I've spent 20 years working on fisheries management and conservation and human rights, particularly with small-scale fishing communities. So I think I'm personally, professionally quite sensitive to the risk that this presents. So I'm speaking here representing ORCA, which is the Ocean Resilience and Climate Alliance, which is a funding initiative to provide surge funding to really accelerate broadly 7 large areas of ocean climate action, from shipping decarbonisation to offshore wind and a number of others, including MCDR. And MCDR is the hot potato within the ORCA portfolio. It's the biggest area of our funding, reflecting, I think, some of the interest in philanthropy, but it's also the most polarizing. It's the most difficult for us to achieve that consensus and common ground within our broad community of funders, and I see the same challenges within the grantees that we support. We're thrilled to be supporting today's event, and we're thrilled to be able to bring people together to talk about this, and I think that's one of the things that philanthropy can do really well. I'll talk about some of the others. I think it's also worth reflecting that oceans more broadly receive a tiny proportion of funding. SDG 14 is famously the least funded of the SDGs. Ocean climate work is a tiny subfraction of ocean funding. African ocean climate work is even less funded. African MCDR funding is a subset even of that. And that broadly reflects the funding that's going into MCDR generally. Globally, I think until last year, just $230 million had been put into MCDR technologies and research and development. We need an awful lot more than that to take this sector to a position where it's safe, where it's responsible, where it's efficacious, and where it's just. I think we would all agree that we have a big challenge above us. It's what I refer to as the trillion-ton challenge. It's the 1,000 gigatons of emissions that can no longer be allowed to remain in the atmosphere, lest we trigger tipping points and runaway climate change. How do we move forward with what is the biggest pollution cleanup operation in the planet's history? We don't have the portfolio of solutions that we need available to us, but we do know that A, it needs to happen, and B, it's unlikely to happen without some technologies involving the biggest carbon sink on the planet, which is the ocean, right? And so we're very far from where we need to be. MCDR is not a technology, it's a catch-all term for multiple approaches, biological, chemical, electrochemical. Very little philanthropy is getting there to help us have the answers that we urgently need, because we have already burned through the available planetary carbon budget, right? So philanthropy can play a really important role in going where markets and governments hesitate, in supporting some of this connective tissue that we as a sector really need to move forward with some of these questions. Some of the things that we are funding are the rigorous science to understand those impacts, to support those rigorous field trials that the private sector or government can't yet support, to support the governance, the MRV, the permitting frameworks, the policies that our panelists have so eloquently talked about the critical need for, also the understanding within our sector. I mentioned it's quite polarizing. I often find I'm more struck by the degree of common ground that we see as a sector on MCDR, but there is a lot of misconception and conflation of some of the issues and technologies when we use terminology like geoengineering. I was speaking to an eminent scientist last week, diplomatically, I shan't name them, but diplomatically pointing out that in a recent publication that was slamming ocean geoengineering, they had conflated offshore renewables, carbon capture and storage, MCDR, solar radiation management, and direct ocean injection of CO2. Now, there are many issues with all of the above, but they can't, none of them, they're not all geoengineering, and it's not helpful if we as a sector don't have that understanding. So I think philanthropy has a really important role to play in helping us keep up with the pace of research and development in this space, right? And it's brilliant to see conversations like the Africa Climate Hub, like what's happening in Weomsa next month, leaders like Mariam coming together, bringing the sector together, the African sector together. Because as Shamin said at the beginning of today, it's totally inappropriate to give someone in Dar es Salaam a new fur coat. It's a fabulous analogy. So crudely, I could summarize all of the above in terms of what we're funding in philanthropy in Africa and elsewhere is answering the following questions. Does MCDR work? Is it safe for people and nature? Is it impactful? Is it in terms of durable removals? Is it just for communities? And is it affordable, crucially, as well? And we need to ask those questions across all of the different pathways that we have available to us, from OIF to OAE, and this is an acronym soup, this sector, MCDR, MRV, OAE, OIF. I will disambiguate all of that later if you're interested. Without the push that philanthropy can provide to go into some of those areas, like providing this space, we risk two outcomes, both of which are not thinkable in my opinion. One is that we stagnate and the sector doesn't advance, and this enormous trillion tons of pollution remains up there. And the other is that we create space, because we don't have that permitting, for bad actors to operate in the CDR space and thus completely remove the social license that the sector urgently needs in order to move forward equitably. We've seen that happen historically with some deployments of ocean iron fertilization, for example, where we've lost a decade of progress because of the irresponsible actions of certain actors in the absence of a robust permitting environment. That's just some of what we're working on. In terms of what one of the very important perspectives that I think Africa can bring, we have a history of, in Africa, of disenfranchisement and marginalization of the biggest group of ocean users. The biggest group of ocean users by far is the small-scale fishing sector. The people who depend on the ocean the most, the people who know the ocean the most, the people who have a far greater knowledge of what's going on above and below the water than I do as a marine biologist. And we have seen in other sectors failures, I would note conservation as an example of that. Conservation moved forward in the ocean in Africa 30 years ago and didn't really get very far because it didn't get that community buy-in. It didn't consult with the right communities, the legitimate local leaders early enough and seriously enough. And as a result, it was perceived as a top-down colonial endeavor. What we're now seeing is the reimagining, the reawakening of community-led bottom-up approaches to ocean management and stewardship in Africa. And I think that it's those experiences from other areas of ocean governance that urgently need to be brought to the MCDR dialogue. And that's where Africa, one of the many areas where Africa can really, really lead.
Because of time, I'll ask my panelists to just give a few, like 10 seconds reflection on the MCDR roadmap, probably how you're going to support the roadmap, and also just your reflection about the whole session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, my colleague on the panel, and thank you so much for recognizing that the small-scale fishers in Africa are a very critical group of stakeholders, and that to some extent they have been disenfranchised. And I would want to say that going forward, I mean, in terms of supporting this, our role actually is to mobilize the small-scale fisheries to understand this particular science as a basis for moving along from a point of information. We understand that we are in an era of evidence-based development work. So I think going forward, we intend to bring this particular agenda to the small-scale fishers, to be able to understand this particular agenda, to be able to appreciate the concerns that should be there, so that as we move towards developing this particular framework, we move with this very critical group on board from a point of information. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm happy that I've been part of this great panel. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, my Ernest. Okay. Yes, it's okay now, right? Yes. Yeah, so thank you. I was saying I'm happy to be part of this very great panel. And I'm also living here with a lot of knowledge and information on MCDR. And for IOC Africa, how we plan to support MCDR, I think ours is to capacity build the science and the researchers to understand and to do more research on this field, and so that the evidence will be there. I also live with, I believe the dialogue is important, these conversations that we are having here. So for us is to promote this conversation where people can sit and discuss about MCDR, so that it's not something from the global north, but it's something that is driven by Africans within our own contexts, and we run with it within our own space as Africans, right? So that it's not a parachuted science kind of thing, but it's science that is developed within us and is grown within Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm super glad to be on this panel and to share a stage with such amazing experts and to learn a lot from you guys. From my side, I think what we do mostly focus on capacity, because I think there's a very great gap between science, climate science, and knowledge dissemination or information dissemination, because most scientists are not trained communication experts. So the way they put these information out there sounds scary sometimes, and this makes it so difficult for the fisher community to even really comprehend and accept. So there's a bit of that issue of understanding or like that contention between the fisher folks and even scientists that want to bring these technologies to their shores, because they feel you are bringing something so alien to them and they don't want to accept it. So I think the issue here should be how we will be able to train our scientists to communicate better. I'm not saying they are not doing better. They are communicating as much as they can, but I think if you can find a way to bridge that communication gap, maybe scientists are not necessarily supposed to do the communication. Maybe they could also train policymakers that have direct access to the communities, community leaders that have direct access to the communities, to really understand what these technologies are, to be able to send this information across. And to us, I think that's what we are so much focused about, bridging that capacity gap by strengthening the very people that can make a decision, because I believe no scientist from nowhere can wake up to the shores of Tanzania and say, I have a research that it would take a policymaker in Tanzania to make that happen. Does the policymaker understand what you are bringing? Or is it just take the money and let me do my science? Thank you very much.
Thanks. My note to self is never go on a panel following Ernest, Edwin and Gabriel and Mariam. Just FYI. They've said it all. Sadly, I think that what we're hearing today is not reflective of the broader global discourse on MCDR, where voices of communities, countries on the front lines of the climate emergency, the people who have contributed to this challenge the least and bear a disproportionate share of vulnerability, are not present at all, let alone proportionately, appropriately. I go from here, as many of you do, to New York Climate Week, where there's a whole week of events on MCDR, which will be dominated by the usual North American and European voices. And so my mantra to my colleagues and grantees and those that I work with is that we absolutely have to redouble our efforts to create more spaces like this one. But talking is great. We also need to actually start to deliver real support for African researchers, African policymakers, African governance specialists to engage and bring African solutions and challenges to the table in the MCDR debate. Because what we're developing for deployment in Nova Scotia on OAE bears no resemblance to what OAE will look like in Madagascar or Guinea-Bissau. And this cannot be a cynical effort for inclusion. We absolutely need to build the space, and that starts by supporting all of those sectors a generation in advance to develop the capacity that they need. So that's what I continue to tell many of our funders in the space. But guys, it's been really fun talking with you.
We need a picture. Thank you so much. Thank you.